Good morning, everyone. I'm Guy Altieri, president of Hagerstown Community College and the chair of the Maryland Council of Community College Presidents. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to the second annual MACC Summit on Completion. It is very exciting to announce that we have well over 400 persons registered to attend today's event, which is absolutely terrific. Our primary goal today, of course, is to share our best practices to enhance student program completion rates, regardless of the students' chosen fields of study. However, before we get the day's programs started and engage in the quality and extensive workshops we have planned, I wanted to thank the members of the CCBC staff and the MACC staff for doing an absolutely terrific job of organizing these events today. We have 22 workshops, which actually doubles the number that we had last year in our first summit, and I know everyone is quite excited to hear about those best practices, those terrific ideas, and the discussion topics today should provide food for thought for many of us to go back to our campuses and reevaluate how we're doing things as we all continue our commitment to improve student completion. Finally, I would like to both thank and introduce our host for the day, Dr. Sandra Kurtinitis, president of CCBC, who is asked at this time to share her greetings and to make a few remarks.
Good morning. It's great to have you here. Let me add my welcome to our CCBC Catonsville campus. You're looking mighty fine. Let me just say that. It's going to be a great day. Our folks have worked really hard to try to make sure you'd have a good experience, and so you'll see probably more signs than you ever need to see, but they will get you where you need to go. We'll feed you well. We'll make sure you can get where you're going. We've got some great speakers. And then, as Guy just said, the workshops of our colleagues from across the state, I think, will provide a very inspiring day for us. Please know, now I have more hardware on today than I ever think I should wear, but we hope that you're wearing the super committed to completion buttons to show that we are all part of the spirit of this day. And we have in the back a MACC completion banner. You can see on the wall our own CCBCs where we've had faculty and staff and students sign, but you can sign the MACC completion banner, which is in the back, and we'll take it down to the lunch as well, so that MACC will also have a written statement of all 400 of us saying how super committed to completion that we are. I would like to add just a few of my own comments to frame this day. This is a really important day for all of us. And I would say something you probably already know: this is a great time to be a community college professional. We know in our state about 500,000 Marylanders come to us each year in our credit and our non-credit programs. And really, community colleges are indeed on everyone's lips and everybody's radar screen. And I sometimes say if we didn't exist, some smart person right now would be inventing us. But a high profile creates a large target. So you know as well as I do the price of fame that we are paying, and that's really why an event like this is so important, not only to show such broad statewide commitment, but indeed to expose our professionals from across the state to best practices, things that are working, so we don't have to reinvent wheels. But I do want to also add, you know as well as I do, you read The Sun, you read your local newspapers, that there are many who would deride our success, many who proclaim from both podia and newspaper headlines that we are not doing our jobs, that we are fiscal black holes, we are not worth the money invested in us because we produce too few degrees. And when you think about where that data comes from, some arcane standard developed back in the 1960s or the 1970s that truly does not reflect who and what we are today. But it is what people are using, and it is why today you will hear the really impressive presentation from our colleague, Craig Claggett, that will begin to show some new ways of doing things. But here's what I would like to say. You have in the material we gave you something that looks like this. It's called a promise to act. A year ago at this event, at the first one, the 16 presidents, community college presidents, all made a very bold commitment. We accepted the challenge on behalf of all of our institutions that we would indeed meet this expectation of increasing completion rates on our campuses. But we said two important things in this document. And there are two things that I would like you to sort of not just cling to, but take hold of and help us make happen. And the first is that we said we will be committed to completion, but it must be the broad definition of completion that reflects our mission: degrees, certificates, transfer, workplace certification. If that is our mission, you can't measure output unless you look at mission. It can't be the other way around. The second thing we said in this document is don't even bother trying to figure out how many of our students complete a degree in just 2 years or 3 years. Not when you have a statewide population, 65% of whom attend part-time, with an average age of 28, many of whom have families and full-time jobs. So we're pushing an agenda together that is very powerful and very meaningful in terms of what the community colleges in Maryland are truly committed to doing. So yes, of course, we will commit to increasing the number of degrees. We are already doing that. And when I think about what happens to us, sometimes I think it's like trying to determine how successful Starbucks is just by counting the number of breakfast pastries that they sell. And if you think about that as one line of business, you have to think about us in the same way. So I think I join my colleagues. I know I speak for my colleagues when I say how much we value the effort that 400 people have made right at the end of the semester. If you're a faculty member, you're trying to figure out, I'm sure, how you get your finals graded. But I like to quote our governor at times like these. And basically, he often says, in times of challenge, we don't make excuses, we make progress. We are the most resilient sector in higher education, and unlike many of our colleagues across the country, we are in the state of Maryland, which truly values and respects its community colleges. So we will come together with your talent, with your energy, with your earnestness and your commitment. We will come together to do for completion what we have done for the past 50 years for access. At CCBC, we're fond of saying that we can afford to have no small conversations. We have to develop broad interventions that positively accelerate and influence the well-being of thousands of Maryland students. And since we won't expect to get a lot of money to do that, we will do it with the grit, the tenacity, the talent, and the dogged determination that has been the hallmark of the Maryland Community College professionals in this room. So I would just say to you, this is a little like preaching to the choir, I know that, but I heard someone quote Sidney Poitier recently, who is reputed to have said, it is important to continue to preach to the choir, otherwise they might stop singing. That's the last thing we want you to do. There are 400 people here today. That is a very strong statement about the community college commitment to completion at all levels. So, my friends, enjoy this highly charged professional development experience that you will have today. Never doubt that we are an important part of not only Maryland's workforce agenda, but we are an important part of the economic and social well-being of our state and our communities. And the proof, they say, is in the pudding, and I would say 500,000 Marylanders can't be wrong. Enjoy the day. If you find that you need something, just find one of those people in those scarves, and I'm sure they'll get you wherever you need to go. Thanks for being here.
Sandra, thank you for those thoughts. Thank you for the passion you show. You never leave the audience in doubt the way you feel. It is now my pleasure to introduce a special guest who has taken on a very challenging role as Interim Secretary for Higher Education, Dr. Danette Howard. Dr. Howard was appointed by Governor O'Malley last August. She has an extensive research background, having served as the Director of Research and Analysis for the Commission for nearly 3 years, and having led the higher education research team at the Education Trust in Washington, D.C. Dr. Howard has assumed her position at a very challenging time where the accountability expectations for colleges and universities are at an all-time high, yet funding on a per-student basis continues to decline for most institutions. We deeply appreciate the advocacy role Dr. Howard plays in supporting the comprehensive mission of Maryland's community colleges. We also thank her for MHEC's commitment to work with us to improve student completion rates at each of our institutions, which serve very diverse communities across the entire state of Maryland. Compared to other states, we should not forget Maryland's completion rates in our community colleges are good in comparison, but we are committed to go from good to excellence in a relatively short period of time, and we appreciate her help in moving us in that direction. So without further delay, I present to you Dr. Danette Howard.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Altieri, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you to the Maryland Association of Community Colleges for the invitation to be here today. I'd like to start by bringing greetings on behalf of Governor O'Malley, who more than most really understands the strong relationship between post-secondary training and job creation, and is wholly committed to ensuring that we in Maryland have a world-class higher education system. So I really love talking about the subject of college completion. Dr. Freeman Rabowski, who is a mathematician by training and who is the president of UMBC, says that he gets goosebumps when he thinks about completing mathematical problems. And for me, it has never been quadratic equations that has brought on the warm and fuzzies. But I really do get incredibly excited when I have the opportunity to think about, discuss, and develop ways to improve what are, in my opinion, the twin pillars of opportunity in our country: access to higher education and success and completion. And for me, it's important that with such a focus on completion, we don't forget about the continuing role of broadening access as well. So anyone who knows you will tell you that I'm passionate about these issues and about the work that we do here in Maryland. In fact, my husband is convinced that if I cannot do this work, I just shrivel up and die. He tells me that all the time. So providing more Marylanders with the opportunity to earn a post-secondary credential is not only important to me because of the position that I currently hold, or because of all of the research studies that I've read or written that show that a person's quality of life is dramatically improved in many, many ways when they earn a college degree or certificate or receive workforce training that will allow them to advance in their careers. This is important to me because I know firsthand that a college education really makes a difference in one's life. My own mother started college when I was 6 months old, and she earned her bachelor's degree when I was in the 3rd grade. So it took her just over 8 years to earn that degree. She would not appear in what many would call the traditional graduation rate or the 6-year graduation rate, but her degree was no less meaningful to her or to our family. And all of our lives literally changed because that degree opened up a whole new world of opportunity for her. And I was old enough to actually understand and experience that change. So coincidentally, while that degree opened up a new world for my mother in terms of employment opportunities, it also opened up a new world of opportunity for me because her earning her degree also coincided with our very first trip to Disney World. And so began my long-standing premise that having a post-secondary credential indeed leads to very, very good things. Community colleges provide that doorway of opportunity that my mom was able to walk through, that first entry point. And for many, many Marylanders, it's at the community colleges that they begin. In fact, just under 50% of all Maryland undergraduates are currently enrolled in a community college. And if you take the independent campuses out of the picture, that number increases to 55%. So I just want all of you to take a moment to appreciate what that means. Over half of undergraduate students in our great state of Maryland are enrolled in your schools. And our 16 community colleges are an essential component of Governor O'Malley's very ambitious completion goal, which presumes that by 2025, 55% of all adult Marylanders will have a post-secondary degree or credential of value. There are already signs that with your help and continued hard work, we will meet that very lofty target. For example, in just the last 5 years, total enrollment at our community colleges has grown by 25%. That is an astounding statistic. And that means that your campuses have increased by nearly 30,000 students in just the last 5 years. This is the fastest rate of growth at any of our post-secondary segments. In terms of completion, there's also much that we can already celebrate. In the last 5 years, the number of degrees and certificates awarded by your campuses has increased by 24%. Again, another really astounding statistic. That means that we've increased by nearly 3,000 credentials in the last 5 years. We also know that in addition to the number of degrees and certificates that have been awarded, thousands more students have transferred from your campuses to our four-year campuses to earn bachelor's degrees, and that many more students have come to your campuses to get the workforce training that they need to take the next step in their careers. These are all really important indicators that suggest that we are well on our way to meeting our completion goal, and that our community colleges add incredible value to our state's system of higher education. I'd like to briefly mention 3 more ways that I think we can continue to make progress in terms of our completion agenda and our completion goals. The first is by continuing to be innovative, by thinking about new and different ways of approaching long-standing issues, be it through implementing course redesign to transform the delivery of high enrollment entry-level courses, or if it's about thinking of new and different and better ways to measure success at our campuses if the traditional metrics aren't adequate. The second way is through collaboration, not only working among the 16 community colleges, as you all do so well, but also continuing to work closely with our colleagues in the four-year sector. Right now, there's excellent ongoing collaboration among the 2- and 4-year campuses around our statewide reverse transfer project to ensure that more students who leave the community colleges before the degree and then transfer to our 4-year campuses might be able to get the associate's degree that they were very close to earning, and also through our course redesign work. And we'd like to see that work and that collaboration between the 2 segments continue and expand. And the third way that I think that we can continue to make progress is through replication. By that I mean by continuing to identify best practices that may exist on one campus or even in another state, and after careful examination and discussion, thinking about ways to best implement those strategies in campus-specific and state-specific and appropriate ways. A new program that we will be talking to you all about very shortly is going to focus on re-engaging near completers. That is, looking at students who stopped out or left our campuses after attaining a high number of credits, but without getting the degree. And so there are some other state models out there that we will be adopting and adapting in Maryland, and you'll be hearing more about that soon. I have great and strong appreciation for our 16 community college presidents and for all of you for continuing to remind us of the importance of your open door mission. Indeed, more than any other college or university in the state, you are best equipped to serve the high school academic all-star and the returning student who has been out of school for several years and needs to start by taking developmental courses, and the full-time worker who wants to take courses that will allow him to receive professional certification. And we all benefit from your playing this very important role, since 91% of your graduates, more than any other post-secondary sector, continue to live and work right here in Maryland after receiving their credentials. So I'd like to thank all of you for your excellent work and for showing your commitment to the completion agenda by sponsoring this second annual Completion Summit. And I look forward to closely working with you all in the days ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. Very well done. Very, very well done. Thank you. At this time, I would like to take a few moments to recognize my fellow college presidents who are here today. In alphabetical order, let me go through the list. The president of Allegheny College of Maryland, Dr. Cindy Bambara. Cindy, are you here? President of Anne Arundel Community College, Marty Smith. The president of Baltimore City Community College, Dr. Caroline Williams. President of Carroll Community College, Dr. Faye Papalardo. The president of Cecil Community College, Dr. Steve Pennell, could not be with us today because of a family funeral, but he asked me to share his best wishes for a successful summit. The president of Chesapeake College, Dr. Barbara Vineyard. The president of the College of Southern Maryland, Dr. Brad Gottfried. And the president of the Community College of Baltimore County, we've introduced her before, but she didn't get applause. Dr. Sandra Kurtinitis. The interim president of Frederick Community College, Doug Browning. President of Garrett College, Rick McLennan. The president of Hartford Community College, Dr. Dennis Galladay. The president of Howard Community College, Dr. Kate Hetherington. The president of Montgomery College, Darian Pollard. President of Prince George's Community College, Dr. Charlene Dukes. And the president of Warwick Community College, Dr. Ray Hoy. I do want to again thank all the presidents for coming today. We remain 16 independent community colleges passionate about serving our local communities, but we also remain a very strong, unified MACC voice. For those of you who attended the MACC Summit on Completion last year, You may recall, as Dr. Kurtinitis mentioned earlier, each of the presidents signed a Promise to Act pledge, which committed all of us to increase Maryland's community college completion rates. Since then, much has happened. Each of our colleges has incorporated completion goals into their annual and/or strategic plans. The community college presidents have incorporated completion as a major component in the statewide plan for community colleges, what we call the MACC 2012 strategic plan. Consistent with the MACC completion plan and related goals, the presidents have charged various MACC affinity groups with identifying barriers and related solutions to enhance student program completion rates. In all of these areas, I'm pleased to report that great progress is occurring. In this regard, I would be remiss if I did not recognize the excellent work of Kim Miller, Research Director at Chesapeake College, who compiled the Best Practices Survey in cooperation with the Chief Academic and Student Services Officers. This work, as well as the good work of all of our affinity groups, is ongoing and helping us meet our goals. Later today, we will be hearing from Dr. Craig Claggett, a Vice President at Carroll Community College. Dr. Claggett has been instrumental in propelling Maryland's community colleges to the forefront in challenging national policies and practices on reporting successful student outcomes. And the great news is that the Maryland message, the MACC message, is getting through. Recently, for example, the Federal Commission on Measures of Student Success issued the draft of its final report to Education Secretary Duncan, which has recommended including graduation and transfer as equal measures of student success at community colleges. This is a valuable step forward. It is a vitally important recognition of the substantial work we are doing each day, both to prepare our students for the workforce and for life, and to succeed when they make the transition to their particular next level of education or training. As community college educators, one of the greatest challenges we face is explaining student success at our institutions. While it seems as though many policymakers are focused primarily on degree completion, we are still very, very committed to provide many opportunities for all types of students whose goals may not be to earn a degree. In accordance with the open access and open goal-setting missions of our colleges, we provide opportunities for all who are seeking post-secondary education in Maryland, regardless of their expressed educational intent. Having said that, there is still much we can do to enhance student success on our campus as pertains to the completion agenda. And that is precisely the focus of today's summit. It is our hope today that all of us will learn about many successful practices and identify some that we think could work as well or better at our particular college. To kick off these best practices, it is my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Yuri Treisman. Dr. Treisman is a renowned expert in course redesign for mathematics, which we know is the single most prevalent academic obstacle to students completing their programs. Dr. Treisman is a professor of mathematics and public affairs at the University of Texas at Austin, where he is the founder and director of the university's Charles A. Dana Center. He is a Senior Advisor Fellow at the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching and serves on the boards of the New Teacher Project, Education Resource Strategies, and the AFT Innovation Fund. He recently served on President Obama's Council of Advisors for STEM and the Carnegie Corporation's Institute for Advanced Study of Mathematics and Science Education. I was also pleased to recently learn that he is now serving on the newly established AACC Commission on the Future of Community Colleges. I'm very, very pleased to present to you Dr. Treisman.
Yes, I long for the day when it'll be art rather than math that's the barriers to people's upward mobility. It's fascinating. I've spent a lot of time now at state convenings like this, and to hear the same language, legislators, including our legislators, who see us as fiscal black holes. So I got to remind our legislators in a recent hearing that if we were a fiscal black hole, that would mean we were an incredibly powerful magnet that draws money to us, and that if he came to our student center, he would see an infinite mass of dollars rather than an occasional quarter that a student drops out of their pocket when studying. I'm going to talk about completion, what's being tried around the country, what seems to have promise, what the challenges are. But I want to start by saying two things. First, in interviewing with Kay McClenny and the Community College Leadership Program, CESI, 700 students in community colleges in the last 18 months, successful students. In all those interviews, you hear the power of individual faculty and student support personnel and the role they play in students actually succeeding. When movements like completion come, people talk structurally. We talk abstractly about redesigning courses and pathways. The data show really clearly that the human contact between faculty and support personnel and students is a profoundly important factor in student success and completion. I know this because President Altieri left out of my CV that I started in the horticulture program, voc ed program at Pierce Community College, worked as a certificated groundsman at the Los Angeles Community College System for 5 years, and owe my future to a faculty member. I used to take my lunch outside of the math building, temporary building, which is still temporary 50 years later. So much for fiscal black hole. And my mother used to play math games with me, so I used to like listening to math, even if I didn't understand all of it. So I take my lunch outside the temporary building, LA, so the windows were open. And Jack Stutzman saw me out there, and he invited me to come into his classroom and take the class. And he told his students that they could eat lunch during the 12 o'clock section because he knew I couldn't do it unless I could eat my lunch during class. Well, he took me under his wing. I did well in his course. He graded my homeworks even though I wasn't enrolled, got me enrolled, took me to his cousin at what was then Valley State. It's now like the Interplanetary University of Northridge, name inflation. And eventually to UCLA Berkeley, where I got my PhD. At his retirement, of course, I discovered I wasn't the only person who he had set on this trajectory. I asked him how he felt about the fact that he had fundamentally shaped my life. And he said that it's a mix between being proud, and really proud of what he was able to accomplish, but mostly it was really anger. Because he said, and this stays with me, he said, why is it that an accident of you having me should be the determinant of your future? Why shouldn't this be what the system actually does rather than be the act of an individual? Well, he knows that the system is made up of individuals who have to act in certain ways, but any structural organizations that you make if they don't increase the human contact between support personnel, faculty, and students, your completion agenda will fail. It cannot just be done by structural things. A second cautionary message. About 6 weeks ago, I was at a very Achieving the Dream Leader campus in Ohio, and I spent the day with their math faculty. They have 100 faculty, 28 chose to come. They were the ones who do all the innovation work, the grant-funded work. And I started the day by having them make a map on butcher paper of the projects they worked on over the last 15 years. And they mapped all these projects out. And it turned out that most of these individuals were involved in more than one project at a time, about 1.25 projects at a time. The projects lasted for 3 years. None of them had ever scaled. And I found this really depressing. On the way to the airport, the vice president for academic affairs drove me to the airport. And I said, he had been there the whole day, and I said, well, what did you think of this? He says, oh, Uri, you don't understand. These things are not, these grants are not about institutional change. They're about faculty professional learning. Really powerful idea, because you can count on one hand the number of pilots, grant-funded pilots, that have actually scaled to change institutional practice. So if we're actually going to work to make our institutions vehicles for upward mobility, which is the real agenda of completion, right, then we have to think about change in different ways than 2 or 3 sections, right, of experimental efforts to establish some data standard that will compel all our faculty colleagues to decide, gee, you're right, that's a better way to do it. We're going to change our practice. So there's a level of a zone of wishful thinking around change efforts that needs to be looked square in the eye, questioned, and changed. If we're actually, this is the time in which, this is the window in which we get to change developmental education. In fact, even the Gates Foundation has stopped calling it developmental education. They buried the name. Now it's early momentum. Right. That's it. We need a professor of euphemisms, a vice president for euphemisms to come around. Right. This is the time to change it. But the challenge is going to be to change developmental education without betraying our mission to be a reliable vehicle for upward mobility, social and economic mobility for our students. If we do what many community colleges are doing, which is raising their entry standards, we will have betrayed our core mission and purpose. So I see, by the way, first of all, I have to say it's great being here. This is a famous campus because you have the ALP program, which everyone is trying to learn from, and the AMP program over in the math department. Great efforts, a lot of people learning from it. But I noticed on the agenda, there was a session called Beyond ALP. And I wonder if they had come to praise Peter or bury Peter. Very hard to tell from the name what that session's actually going to be about. So if we're serious about completion, about building pathways to and through key college courses, we have to remember that completion is not just about individual classes. The first wave of reform in developmental education, the acceleration movement, the NCAT movement, was about changing structure, delivery vehicles, speeding up course patterns. And one of the things we discovered is that makes a big difference in the proportion of people who pass a gateway course. But then we noticed that that doesn't really add a lot to the completion agenda. If you just start by thinking the problem is improving developmental education, that's different from organizing courses that deal with the things that actually shape completion: professional advising, goal setting, for students being able to see a real light at the end of the educational tunnel. It has profound implications for support services. So completion means we have to rethink what the purpose of the on-ramps actually is. And if we try to fix them a course at a time or focus them only on gateway courses, we're going to ignore the issues that actually help students complete in the end. There are very large numbers of students who complete gateway courses and or 30 units who do not graduate, as you know from your data. So at this moment of completion agenda, we need to step back and think about the big picture, the big goals. And when we do that, we see that there's a nested set of practices, structures, and policies that have to be changed at the same time. And the first of them for math, which is a burial ground for the aspirations of myriad students, is that the goals are completely, as my mother would say, verkachte. Right? The goals are, it's a 16th century mathematics. I have interviewed all over the country people who want to be firemen, who were caught in courses trying to factor trinomials or rationalize binomial surd denominators. I wonder when the last time any of the non-math people in the audience rationalized the binomial surd denominator. I see people who want to be EMTs, LVNs, and they have to take courses that are purely compliance efforts. In one state, in the Southwest, they plan to solve the developmental math problem by breaking it into 120 little modules with no final exam, so that if students for 7 minutes can factor a trinomial, they've met the requirement. Speak about betrayal of our academic purposes, right? So we have to get the goals right. And when we think about the goals, we have to be responsive both to the changing discipline of mathematics, which is not the same as it was in the 16th century. Today's DevEd math students learn no mathematics that was developed in the 17th century or after. Right? Just think about that. There's virtually no statistics, no mathematical modeling, and we know from Department of Labor Studies, Mike Handel's study, that only 22% of people use algebra in their work or anything beyond it. We now have really good data on this. I think the main use of algebra is to help your kids with their algebra homework. I was one of the mathematicians who was the leader in the Algebra for All movement. What we actually ended up with is algebra forever for our students. Algebra is really important, but statistics is even more important for many people on many pathways and for citizenship. This cannot be changed one campus at a time because of articulation agreements. It needs to be changed systemically and across the country. And to that end, the Dana Center and the Carnegie Foundation have convened the 17 professional associations of mathematicians. And most of the leaders of those organizations were stunned about what constitutes mathematics in these courses. Kids sitting in front of computers, pressing buttons, trying to guess the right answer. Right? This is criminal, right? And we need to stop it. And there was very little of the math wars that characterized K-12 math reform. It's time to modernize the curriculum so that students know what the evidence is for requiring them to take anything they take. And speaking of evidence, when we say something is a prerequisite for something else, we should be able to state what the evidentiary standard for that is. In Alabama, they require intermediate algebra to take statistics. But half the students take the prerequisite course after they take statistics. This is a prerequisite. Right? So we have to actually look carefully at what we require and what the evidentiary standard for it is. And when we say that A is a prerequisite for B, we should actually know why. And that should not be set by just math faculty who tend to remember what we ourselves had in high school. Right? It needs to have a broad constituency define what the requirements are for things that are really connected to people's lives. So is there a problem here? In California, 2 years ago, 35,000 students repeated a DevEd math course for the 5th or greater number of times when they turned away 144,000 students for lack of space. At Tacoma Community College last year, no new enrolled student could take developmental math because every single slot was filled with students who had failed it the year before. I interviewed several of you as you were coming in. Typically, your Dev Ed math courses have 50 to 60% pass rates. And your beginning college courses have 50% success rates. So about 6% to 10% of your students who actually start in the beginning complete. At San Diego Community College, we're influenced by Kay McClenny, who's been my mentor in this. I wanted to interview all the successful students who had come through these pathways and learn from them. So I asked the Director of Institutional Research to identify all the students who started in beginning algebra and completed differential equations over 3 years. So I come for the meeting, and she says, I say, can I have the data? She says, data, Rosa Martinez. So as a mathematician, I can tell you when you can name the cases, and you don't need third-order moments of probability distributions, right? The second big challenge is placement. If there were ever a criminal enterprise, it's placement. Most students come in at the end of orientation, they take a placement. The advisors tell them, don't worry, you can't fail it. Oh, yes, you can. We know now from experiments in California and Texas that 1 week of prep or online support could save students a course and a half on average in developmental mathematics. Students should know how consequential those tests are. They come in, they're tired, they're rusty, they don't know how important it is, and they don't know how expensive it's going to be for them, and how the rate at which, the level at which it will decrease the likelihood of their completion. So placement has to be rethought. Students should know, we should have to disclose how important it is. Students should have to sign the fact that they understand its importance. We should require them as much as we can to prepare for the placement tests. The placement tests are confusing students who are rusty with students who never had an opportunity to learn. That is criminal. How do we know this? The average grade in California of students who placed in elementary algebra, who are 18-year-olds, who finished Algebra 2 in high school, students placed in elementary algebra have a 3.1 GPA in high school in a course beyond the one they took. So many community college faculty say, well, the high schools weren't really teaching it. So we did an experiment at a Massachusetts community college, where there's a group of faculty who actually teach as courses in the local high schools, right, dual and concurrent enrollment programs. So they had taught these kids Algebra 2 and college algebra, and they got placed in elementary algebra in their own community college. So they gathered the students together, they paid them $25, they gave them 3 hours, and on day one, instead of the course, they asked them to take the final exam for the course, and they filmed it. And the students are there, they go, I never saw that. Never, I never learned that. Then like 3 minutes later, they go, oh yeah, that's sort of familiar. They were allowed to take it as a group. They got almost a perfect score on the test. And Ed Joyce, one of the faculty members, looks right into the camera, he says, oh my God, they know it before I could teach it, before I teach it, but not after. As if we didn't need more opportunities for humility in our work as community college faculty. So placement needs to be fundamentally changed. If you haven't read One Shot Deal by my student Andrea Venezia, you need to read that. Community colleges all over the place are individually experimenting with prep, required boot camps, online supports, disclosing the specifications for the items, right? And that should be done as a system. It shouldn't just be done campus by campus. It's much cheaper to do that. That's something the Maryland Association of Presidents need to work on together. It will save a fortune for our students. Articulation. One of the reasons faculty are reluctant to innovate is because they don't have no control over what the four-year institutions will accept. That is crazy. In one state, one dyspeptic math chair who thinks that everyone, including art majors and interior designers, need to take calculus, gets to set the articulation agreements. We're talking about our national system for increasing people's social and economic quality of their lives. The decisions about what counts can't reside in one dyspeptic person. Right? We need better governance systems to choose that involve all the stakeholders, not just the academic ones, right, in determining what counts. And we're seeing states of Florida, Sandy Shugard's work down at Valencia, experiment with agreements where our programs block transfer and students lose no space. I chair a Department of Defense committee looking at mobility in military families. And it is a landscape of littered landscape of lost credits, right? Somehow algebra in Georgia is different than algebra in Texas. I mean, this stuff is craziness, and it interferes with the ability to aggregate legitimately earned units. And that's key to completion. Courses. One of the things we learned from Martha Cantor when she was community college president in California, she ran her data. Students who were perceived that they were in programs did much better than students who perceived that they were in classes. Right. Large numbers of our students look at our college catalogs and feel you need to get a PhD to figure out what your options are. There's overwhelming research now in marketing and behavioral psychology that shows that if students are faced with too many choices, they punt. And they're dissatisfied with their choices to boot. There are large numbers of our students who we can predict will benefit from having 3 or 4 prefix options with the student support woven into those options. Not all, we have incredible diversity in our student populations, but we know half of them would benefit from high levels of structure, fewer choices, more integrated support. The behavioral psychology of this is well known. We need to use opt-out rather than opt-in strategies for them. Here's a program we think, or 3 programs we think are best suited to your aspirations. You can opt out of them. But many more students will opt in to things that are structured and coherent, where we get help to them when they need it, rather than random assignment of students. This brings up student support. One of the great student support people here said, tell them we need more support and more money. Safe bet, that's true. But there's a big problem with student support. Interviewing student support people in math, the most common refrain is, if I only saw them 2 weeks earlier. If you're behind in a developmental math course, you're not going to catch up by tutoring. Right? You're not going to catch up. You don't see advising. You don't see your tutor until it's too late. And we're seeing wholesale changes around the country in the organization of student supports. We're seeing more and more places. First of all, we're learning that student supports need to be mandatory, not optional. Beautiful Arlene Onsberger tape of a student, indignant student, saying, you mean you knew this was good for me and you didn't make me do it? Many students do not do optional. That means we need to experiment with new kinds of collaboration between student support and academic faculty, in which tutors are assigned back to work with faculty in their classrooms on day 1. That students know the people on day 1 who are responsible for managing their success at the institution. Resources are a problem here, so this is where analytics really matter. And you can identify, and your faculty can identify by the end of the first week with high reliability which students are going to make it and which students won't. And the idea that we let students get into trouble and then send them over to a building, usually in the basement of an administration building, to get help, is insanity. So completion is going to force structural changes in student support. It's going to elevate the role of student support. And that's going to mean that one is going to have to look afresh at what the evidence base is for student support. We looked at student support services and student success classes, 28 institutions, found virtually no overlap in the underlying ideas or theories. One place we found it was about emotional intelligence, the student support courses. Another one was about study skills, and we could not find any research basis for those study skills. We in fact traced a lot of them back to 19th century moral education. Right? We know from almost minute by minute tracking of students now, the SENSE project, right? They follow video interviews of students moving through, that about 90% of our students, the week before they start our programs, are positive they'll succeed. It's very hard to find a student who enters our campuses who doubts that they're going to be very successful. What happens is they get the first math assignment and they really want to do it. They go home and they look at it, they have no clue what to do. And they lower their estimate of success. And when they lower their estimate of success, they still know they're going to succeed, but when they lower their estimate of success, they hedge their bets and they add an hour or two to their work schedule. By the third week, they miss a homework assignment. By the fifth week, depending on who they are culturally, they might either show up and be not there, or they just miss class and drop out. This hyperbolic discounting, we can actually model this. Our student services need to be there to block this cycle of disinvestment on day one. How many of your students, when they get a test back, go, I got a C, like it's a lottery? Right? We know that most of our students can't judge the connection between their effort and their achievement. They can't calibrate. They're very weak in setting short-term and middle-term functional goals. Well, we know Gabriel Ottingen's work, how to help people set goals and stick to them. We know how to create engagement cycles rather than disinvestment cycles. We know that we can change students' mindsets about the relationship between effort and achievement. That's what student services needs to modernize its underlying theoretical armamentarium. It needs better tools and better strategies. It can't be organized around a strategy of helping students after they get in trouble, right? That's not going to work. Last, there's a lack of improvement infrastructure. On almost every campus I visit, the president has liberated the faculty to be innovators and given them nothing to innovate with. Being a designer means you have tools and supports, and you have to work on things that are not only at your pay grade level. What's required is a joyful conspiracy. You have to work at the governance level, the president's level, the dean's level, the faculty level, the student support level. You have to coordinate activity at different levels of the system. And when we look at what has scaled, the green movement, service learning, some aspects of hybrid delivery systems, those had political components, they had leadership components, they had accountability components, right? We're not going to solve the completion problem by asking faculty to improve their courses in isolation on their individual campuses. It has to be a system issue. So this joyful conspiracy is what you need to enter into with each other and your colleagues around the country, because we exist in a fog of collective amnesia. People are creating their innovations out of what they happen to come across first, or what they happen to individually like, or a vendor who comes and sells them something. This has to happen at a system level, common solutions to common problems. And it's going to take a while to get this right, but we're not going to do it just bottom up. It has to be top down and through the middle as well. So what's at stake here? What is the completion agenda really about? It's driven by optimism in the rhetoric, but underneath, the people who are pushing it are driven by fear. And what's the fear? Where does the fear come from? North Carolina, I did a session like this, and one faculty member said, I used to be teaching at our place a lot of clueless 18 and 19-year-olds. Now I have a lot of 40-year-olds who are just desperate for work. And one guy in my Dev Ed math class stood up and just said to me, he said, look, I cashed in my 401k for this. I have 2 kids, I have a wife, I have a mother I have to support. I need a job. I can't be sitting here doing fractions. I have to know that this actually leads to a job. We have large numbers of people in this country who, with our help, became middle class, and a lot of those people are returning to the lower classes. We're not, as a people, uncomfortable with inequality, fiscal inequality, as long as we believe that through effort and achievement, we can better our lives and our children's lives. And guess what? Who's responsible for that? Us. That's the mission and purpose of community colleges. Reliable, effective pathways to upward social and economic mobility. And what we have is Dev Ed courses that 10% of our students are referred to them actually complete even a gateway course in their first year. This downward mobility will threaten democracy. Americans love nostalgia, but we're not very fond of history. We think that democracy is going to be here because of Thomas Jefferson. In fact, democracies are fragile, and they break apart when people have no pathway to upward mobility. That's why we're here, and our jobs are so critical to American democracy. And it's going to require not that we look at the particular old arrangements we have, but we actually build systems that allow people through education. These are the people coming to us who want to improve their lives through education. We have to know that the programs they enroll in work with very high reliability. And that is what this completion agenda should be about. It will require structural changes, and it will require the presidents and trustees to figure out which common problems need to be worked on in common with the governor's office. Thank you.